Clara Sullivan pressed her youngest against her chest and counted her children through the smoke. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her throat closed. Where was Abigail? Mama! The scream came from the back of the burning cabin. Clara handed the baby to 9-year-old Thomas. Don't move. She ran into the flames. This is a story of fire and redemption of a widow with nothing and a cowboy who owned everything, and how one desperate night changed them both forever. Stay until the end. Comment your city below. Let me see how far this story travels. The flames had already eaten through the back wall when Clara found Abigail. Her 7-year-old daughter stood frozen beside the bed, clutching the rag doll her father had given her the Christmas before he died. The doll's yarn hair had started to smoke. Abigail, come now. The child didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond the fire, beyond the cabin, beyond anything Clara could see or understand. Clara grabbed her daughter's arm and yanked. The doll fell. Abigail screamed. Leave it. Daddy gave it to me. Abigail, we will die. The ceiling groaned above them. Clara didn't wait for permission. She scooped her daughter up and ran, flames licking at her skirts, smoke filling her lungs, until every breath felt like swallowing glass. Thomas stood exactly where she'd left him, the baby pressed against his thin chest, his face pale as winter moonlight. Beside him, 5-year-old Ruth held 3-year-old Samuel's hand with white-knuckled determination. The boy was crying, but quietly, the way children learn to cry when noise means danger. Out! Clara gasped. Everyone out, now! They stumbled into the December night. Cold hit them like a wall. Clara's skin, superheated from the cabin, screamed at the sudden change. Behind them, the only home they'd known for 3 years collapsed inward with a sound like God giving up. Mama! Thomas's voice cracked on the word. Mama, what do we do? Clara counted again. Thomas 9. Abigail 7, Ruth 5, Samuel 3, and baby William, just 14 months, still crying against his brother's shoulder. All 5. All alive. For now. She looked around at the endless Wyoming darkness. Snow covered the ground in patches not deep enough to slow travel, but cold enough to kill. The nearest neighbor was the Hendricks place 8 miles east. The town of Clearwater sat 12 miles south. They had no coats, no food, no horse. The fire had started so fast. One moment she'd been nursing William by the stove. The next, flames were climbing the wall behind her. She'd barely had time to grab the children. We walk, Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt. South toward town. Mama, I'm cold! Ruth's teeth were already chattering. Clara stripped off her shawl, singed but intact, and wrapped it around Ruth and Samuel together. Stay close to your brother. Thomas, keep William inside your shirt against your skin. Body heat. Yes, ma'am. They walked. The first mile passed in silence, broken only by Samuel's quiet crying and the crunch of frozen grass beneath their feet. Clara carried Abigail, who had gone silent and limp in her arms, still in shock from losing her father's doll. Clara understood that loss more than she could say. That doll was the last piece of Henry they had, the last proof he'd existed at all. Henry, dead 8 months now, killed when his horse threw him into a ravine. The doctor said he'd died quickly. The doctor always said that. Clara had never believed it. Mama, I can't feel my feet. Thomas spoke through gritted teeth. Keep walking. Moving keeps the blood flowing. William's too quiet. Clara's heart seized. She moved to Thomas's side, pulling open his shirt to check the baby. William's eyes were closed, his tiny lips slightly blue. No. She breathed on his face, rubbed his small hands between her own. Wake up, little one. Wake up for Mama. William stirred. His eyes fluttered open. He began to cry, weak but crying. Thank God. Thank God. He's all right, Clara lied. Keep him warm. They walked. The second mile brought wind. It came from the north carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin like tiny needles. Ruth stopped walking. "I can't," the 5-year-old whispered. "Mama, I can't." Clara set Abigail down. Her arms screamed in relief, then immediately began aching from the cold. She knelt before Ruth, taking her daughter's face in her hands. "Ruth Elizabeth Sullivan, look at me." Wet blue eyes met hers. "Your papa is watching us right now from heaven. He's saying, 'That's my brave girl. That's my Ruth, strong as the river she's named for.' Are you going to make your papa a liar?" Ruth's chin trembled. "No, ma'am." "Then walk, 1 foot then the other, that's all. Can you do that?" A tiny nod. They walked. Somewhere in the 3rd mile, Clara realized they weren't going to make it. The children were slowing. Thomas had stopped talking entirely, all his energy focused on keeping William alive inside his shirt. Ruth stumbled every few steps. Samuel had to be carried now, too exhausted and cold to walk. And Abigail had started humming. Clara recognized the hymn. "Shall we gather at the river?" The song they'd sung at Henry's funeral. "Stop that," Clara said sharply. Abigail kept humming. "I said stop. It's what Papa sang when he was scared." Abigail's voice was dreamy, detached. "He sang it on the mountain, before he fell." Clara's blood went cold. "How do you know that?" "He told me, just now. He says we're almost there, Mama. He says someone's coming." Clara looked at her daughter, really looked, and saw something that terrified her more than the fire had. Abigail's eyes had gone distant, fixed on something far away. Her skin was gray. Her lips were moving in prayer. Her daughter was dying. They all were. Clara sank to her knees in the frozen grass, pulling all 5 children against her. Ruth and Samuel on one side, Thomas with the baby on the other. Abigail cradled in her lap. She wrapped her arms around as many of them as she could reach. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I tried. God knows I tried." Thomas looked up at her, and in his 9-year-old eyes, she saw something no child should ever carry, understanding. "I know, Mama. It's all right." It wasn't all right. It would never be all right. Clara had promised Henry on his deathbed that she would protect their children, had sworn it on her soul. And now, Mama. Thomas's voice sharpened. "Mama, look!" Clara raised her head. Light. Not fire, she knew. Fire now knew its hungry orange glow. This was different. Yellow and steady. A lantern maybe moving through the darkness toward them. And sound. Hoofbeats. Fast and getting closer. Clara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey. The cold had stolen too much from her. All she could do was hold her children and watch as the light grew brighter. A horse emerged from the darkness. Black as coal, massive breathing clouds of steam into the frigid air, and on its back, a man. He pulled up short, the horse dancing beneath him, and swung down before the animal had fully stopped. In 2 strides, he was kneeling beside her, his face half-shadow beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Ma'am." The voice was deep, rough as untanned leather. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Clara's tongue felt frozen. "My children. I see them." He was already pulling off his coat, heavy wool, lined with something soft. "How long have you been out here?" "I don't know. The cabin. Fire. We had to run." The man wrapped his coat around Ruth and Samuel, then turned to examine Thomas and the baby. His movements were quick, efficient, like someone who'd dealt with crisis before, the little ones breathing shallow. He looked at Clara. "I've got a horse, but she can't carry all of you at once. My ranch is 3 miles west. Can your boy walk if I carry the others?" Thomas straightened. "I can walk, sir." "Good man." The stranger lifted Ruth, Samuel, and Abigail together, settling them against his chest. "You." He nodded at Clara. "Get on the horse. Hold the baby." "I can't take your horse while you walk." "Ma'am, with respect, this ain't a negotiation. You're half frozen and your children are worse. Get on the horse." Clara had never been spoken to like that. Henry had always been gentle, deferential, asking rather than telling. This man didn't ask. She got on the horse. Thomas handed William up to her, and Clara tucked the baby inside what remained of her dress against her skin. The stranger's coat had already started to warm the other children. She could see color returning to Ruth's cheeks. "Stay close," the man said to Thomas. "Match my pace. If you start to flag, tell me." "Yes, sir." They moved. Clara clung to the horse's mane with one hand and cradled William with the other. The animal seemed to know where it was going, picking its way through the darkness with sure-footed confidence. Ahead of her, the stranger walked with 3 children bundled against him, his stride never faltering. Who was this man? "What's your name?" Clara called. He glanced back. In the faint starlight, she caught the edge of a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Hawthorne. Jackson Hawthorne. Hawthorne. The name hit Clara like a physical blow. Everyone in the territory knew that name. Hawthorne Ranch, biggest spread in Wyoming. 40,000 acres of prime grazing land. Hawthorne cattle. Hawthorne horses. Hawthorne money funding half the businesses in Clearwater. Jackson Hawthorne. The man who'd built an empire from nothing after his father drank away the family fortune. The man who'd fought in the war between the states and come home with medals and nightmares in equal measure. The man whose wife had died in childbirth 7 years ago, taking his only son with her. The man who hadn't spoken to a woman since. That was the rumor anyway. Jackson Hawthorne kept to himself, ran his ranch with iron efficiency, and never attended church, never came to town. Dances, never showed interest in any of the widows and spinsters who would have thrown themselves at his feet. And now he was carrying her children through the Wyoming night like they were made of glass. "Mr. Hawthorne." "Save your strength, ma'am. Talk later." Clara fell silent. The ranch appeared suddenly, or maybe Clara had just stopped seeing clearly. One moment there was only darkness, and the next buildings rose before them. A massive main house, barns, bunkhouses, corrals stretching into the shadows. "Eli!" Hawthorne's shout cut through the silence. "Eli, get out here!" Doors opened. Men emerged, rubbing sleep from their eyes, pulling on coats. A tall man with dark skin and sharp features reached them first. "Boss, what?" He stopped short at the sight of the children. "Jesus Christ." "Fire at the Sullivan place. The widow and her young ones. Get the doctor from town now, and wake my aunt." "Yes, sir." Hawthorne carried the children inside. Clara slid from the horse and nearly collapsed. Her legs had gone numb during the ride. Strong hands caught her. "Easy, ma'am. I've got you." She looked up into Jackson Hawthorne's face. He wasn't handsome. That was her first clear thought. His features were too harsh, too weathered, the scar too prominent. But his eyes, dark gray, the color of thunderclouds, held something she hadn't expected. Concern. Real, genuine concern. "My children," she managed. "Inside. Come on." He half carried her through the door into warmth so sudden it made her gasp. A fire burned in a massive stone hearth. Lamps glowed on every surface. And there, on a long sofa before the fire, her 5 children were being tended by an older woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. "Aunt Ida." Hawthorne set Clara in a chair near the fire. "This is Mrs. Sullivan. She needs—" "I have eyes, Jackson." The old woman didn't look up from examining Ruth's hands. "I can see what she needs. You go tend to that boy of hers who's still standing in the yard trying to be brave." Hawthorne hesitated, his gaze lingering on Clara for a moment that felt too long. Then he nodded and left. The woman called Ida moved to Clara's side. "Let me see that baby." Clara's arms tightened instinctively. "Child, I raised Jackson and his 2 brothers. I know how to hold a baby without breaking it. Now let me see him." Slowly, Clara released William. Ida's examination was thorough and surprisingly gentle. "He's cold, but he's strong. Good lungs. He'll be fine with warming." She looked at Clara with eyes that missed nothing. "You're the Sullivan widow. The one whose husband fell off his horse last spring. Yes, ma'am. Henry Sullivan. I remember him. Good man. Bad luck. Ida handed William back. You've got 5 children, no husband, and now no home. Is that about the size of it? Clara's throat closed. Yes, ma'am. Ida nodded once, sharp and decisive. Well, we'll figure something out. For now you're safe. All of you. My nephew may be as sociable as a wounded bear, but he doesn't turn away women and children. I can't impose. Didn't say you were imposing. Said you were safe. Ida stood. There's a difference. Now let me see to those other little ones. The doctor will be here within the hour. Clara watched her go. Around her, the warmth of the house began to seep into her bones. Ruth and Samuel had fallen asleep on the sofa, curled together under a thick blanket. Abigail sat staring at the fire, her eyes clearer now but still far away. And Thomas. The door opened. Jackson Hawthorne entered with Thomas beside him. Her eldest son was wrapped in a blanket. Color returned to his cheeks, looking exhausted but alive. He didn't complain once, Hawthorne said. 3 miles in that cold and not one word. You should be proud of him. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I am. Hawthorne looked uncomfortable with her emotion. He shifted his weight, glanced toward the fire, then back at her. I'll have Eli prepare rooms for you and the children. You'll stay until we figure out what comes next. Mr. Hawthorne, I can't possibly... Ma'am? He held up one hand. Your cabin is gone. It's the middle of December. You've got 5 children, the youngest just past a year old. Where exactly do you plan to go? Clara opened her mouth. Closed it. She had no answer. That's what I thought. Hawthorne moved toward the door. Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning. Why are you doing this? The question stopped him. He stood with his hand on the doorframe, his back to her. What? Why are you helping us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Silence stretched. When Hawthorne spoke, his voice was different, quieter, stripped of its rough edges. I lost a son once, a wife too. Didn't have anyone to help us when it happened. Might have made a difference if I had. He glanced back over his shoulder, and for just a moment Clara saw past the hardness to something broken beneath. Maybe I'm just trying to be the man I wish had been there for me. He left before she could respond. Clara sat alone in the warm glow of the fire, her baby in her arms, her children safe around her. She should feel grateful, should feel relieved. Instead, she felt something far more dangerous. Hope. And behind the hope, quiet but persistent, a question she wasn't ready to answer. What kind of man rode through the night to save strangers? And what would it mean for all of them if she let herself find out? Clara woke to the sound of her children breathing. For one disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft. The air was too warm. And her children, all 5 of them, were alive. Memory crashed back. The fire, the cold, the man on the black horse. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake William, who slept curled against her side. Across the room, Ruth and Samuel shared a small bed, their faces peaceful. Thomas had taken the floor near the door, ever the protector, and Abigail was gone. Clara's heart stopped. She was out of bed in an instant, her bare feet hitting cold wood. Abigail. Mama. Thomas stirred, rubbing his eyes. What's wrong? Your sister. Where's your sister? Thomas pointed toward the door. She went to find the kitchen, said she was hungry. Clara grabbed the shawl someone had left on the chair and ran. The Hawthorne house was larger than she'd realized last night. Hallways branched in multiple directions. Doors led to rooms she couldn't identify. She was about to call out again when she heard it. Laughter. Abigail's laughter. Clara followed the sound to a massive kitchen at the back of the house. There, seated at a worn wooden table, was her daughter. And across from her, holding a wooden spoon like a scepter, was Jackson Hawthorne. Now watch careful, he was saying. The trick is in the wrist. He flicked the spoon. A glob of porridge flew through the air and landed perfectly in an empty bowl 3 feet away. Abigail clapped. "Do it again." Abigail Marie Sullivan. Both of them turned. Abigail had the grace to look guilty. Hawthorne simply set down the spoon and stood. "Ma'am, good morning." "Mr. Hawthorne, I apologize. She shouldn't have bothered you." "No bother." He wiped his hands on a cloth. Child was hungry. Seemed wrong to make her wait. Clara stared at this man, this legend, this recluse who was apparently teaching her daughter to fling porridge across the kitchen. Nothing about him matched the rumors. "You cook." "My aunt would say I heat things up. Cooking requires skill I don't possess." He nodded toward the stove. "There's coffee if you want it. And more porridge, though I can't promise the quality." Clara's stomach growled before she could decline. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. None of them had. "Thank you." She sat at the table, pulling Abigail onto her lap. The child went willingly, still clutching a biscuit Hawthorne must have given her. "Mama, Mr. Jackson says he has horses. Real ones. Can I see them?" "We'll see, sweetheart." "That means no." "That means we'll see." Hawthorne set a bowl of porridge in front of Clara without comment. It was lumpy and slightly burned, but it was hot, and right now hot food felt like salvation. "The doctor came last night," Hawthorne said, returning to his seat across from them. "Said your children are fine. Cold exposure, but no permanent damage. The baby's lungs are clear." Clara's eyes burned. "Thank God." "Your feet are another matter. Frostbite on 3 toes. Doc says you need to stay off them for at least a week." "A week?" Clara shook her head. "Mr. Hawthorne, I can't impose on you for a week." "Can't walk on damaged feet either. Seems like staying is the only choice that doesn't end with you losing toes." Put that way, he had a point. "I have nowhere to go," Clara admitted quietly. "No family, no savings. Henry left debts I didn't know about until after he died. The cabin was all we had, and now you're here." Hawthorne's voice was matter of fact. "And here is where you'll stay until we figure something else out." He held her gaze. "You didn't think I'd throw you out in the snow, did you?" Clara didn't know what she'd thought. Her experience with men had been limited. Henry had been kind but weak, full of dreams but short on follow-through. Her father had been worse, a drunk who'd sold her to Henry at 16 for the price of a horse. And now here was Jackson Hawthorne offering shelter to a stranger, feeding her daughter biscuits and acting like none of it was unusual. "Why are you helping us?" It was the same question she'd asked last night. This time he didn't look away. "Because I can." He pushed back from the table. "That's reason enough, isn't it?" Before Clara could answer, the kitchen door banged open. A man strode in, tall, weathered, with a face like old leather. He stopped short at the sight of Clara. "Boss, we got a problem." His eyes flicked to Clara, then back to Hawthorne. "Private problem." Hawthorne stood. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is Eli Crow, my foreman. Eli, watch your language. There are children present." "Sorry, ma'am." Eli touched his hat brim. "Boss, it's Clayton Mercer. He's in the yard. Brought 6 men with him." The name meant nothing to Clara, but she saw Hawthorne's jaw tighten, saw his hands curl into fists at his sides. "Stay here," he said to Clara. "Keep the children inside." He was gone before she could ask questions. Clara set Abigail down. "Stay with Eli. I need to check on your brothers and sisters." "But Mama..." "Stay." She moved through the house as fast as her damaged feet would allow, gathering her children. Thomas met her in the hallway, already dressed, already alert. "I heard men outside," he said. "Who are they?" "I don't know, but we stay inside until Mr. Hawthorne tells us otherwise." They gathered in the front parlor, away from the windows. Ruth held Samuel's hand. Abigail clutched her rescued biscuit. Thomas stood near the door, trying to look older than his 9 years. and Clara held William against her chest, listening to the muffled sounds of voices from the yard. She couldn't make out words, but she could hear tone, and the tone was not friendly. Then a crash. A shout. The unmistakable sound of a fist hitting flesh. Thomas was at the window before Clara could stop him. "Thomas, get back!" "Mama, mister!" "Hawthorne just knocked a man down, and there's 6 more with guns." Clara's blood went cold. She handed William to Ruth. "Watch them. Don't leave this room." "Mama, you can't." "Watch them, Thomas." She was out the front door before her son could protest. The cold hit her immediately. She'd forgotten she was barefoot, wearing only a nightgown and shawl. But the scene in the yard drove all thoughts of cold from her mind. Jackson Hawthorne stood facing 6 mounted men. A 7th lay in the dirt, groaning and clutching his jaw. Behind Hawthorne, a dozen ranch hands had gathered, but none had drawn weapons. The man at the center of the mounted group was older, silver-haired, with the kind of face that looked handsome until you noticed the cruelty in his eyes. "Jackson Hawthorne." His voice dripped with false pleasantness. "Still solving problems with your fists, I see." "Clayton Mercer." Hawthorne's voice was flat. "Get off my land." "Your land?" Mercer laughed. "That's what I came to discuss. You see, I've just returned from the territorial office in Cheyenne. Interesting documents there. Seems your father's original claim had some irregularities." "My father's claim was settled 30 years ago." "Settled, yes, but properly filed." Mercer's smile widened. "That's another matter. I've got lawyers looking into it. Good lawyers, the kind who find problems where others see none." Hawthorne didn't flinch. "What do you want, Mercer?" "What I've always wanted. The water rights to Copper Creek. Sign them over and my lawyers might suddenly lose interest in your paperwork." "Go to hell." The man Hawthorne had knocked down staggered to his feet. "You're going to pay for that, Hawthorne. Nobody touches me, and quiet, Marcus." Mercer's voice was sharp. He looked past Hawthorne and his eyes found Clara standing on the porch. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Clara felt his gaze like something physical, dirty, invasive. "Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it the widow from the burned cabin?" Mercer clicked his tongue. "Such a tragedy, that fire. Though I hear you've landed on your feet, or rather in Jackson Hawthorne's bed." Clara's face flushed with fury. "How dare you? Mrs. Sullivan!" Hawthorne's voice cut through. "Go inside." "Yes, Mrs. Sullivan." Mercer's smile was poison. "Go inside. Let the men handle business. Though I wonder what your dear departed husband would think seeing you here. Henry Sullivan owed me $300 when he died. Did you know that gambling debts? Your husband was quite fond of cards. Quite fond and quite terrible." Clara's world tilted. Henry. Gambling debts. $300. It couldn't be true. Henry had been many things, dreamer failure week, but a gambler. You're lying. Am I? Mercer reached into his coat and produced a folded paper. I have his signature right here. $300 due upon demand. And since dear Henry is no longer with us, that debt falls to you, Mrs. Sullivan, his widow, his heir. Clara's legs threatened to give out. I don't have $300. No, I don't imagine you do. But there are other ways for a woman to pay debts. Mercer's eyes traveled down her body. My saloon in town always needs new girls. Pretty woman like you, even with 5 children, could work off that debt in a year or 2. That's enough. Hawthorne's voice had gone cold as the December wind. Get off my land, Mercer. Now. Or what? You'll hit me too. Mercer laughed. I'm not some hired hand you can bully. I own half this territory's businessmen. I own the sheriff. I own... You don't own me. Hawthorne moved. Fast. Before anyone could react, he'd pulled Mercer from his horse and slammed him against the ground. His boot pressed against Mercer's chest. You come to my land again. You threaten people under my protection again. and I will forget I'm civilized." Hawthorne's voice was quiet, terrifying. "Do you understand me, Clayton?" For the first time, fear flickered across Mercer's face. "Your protection. She's not your wife, Hawthorne. She's not even your whore yet. What claim do you have?" "The claim of a man who doesn't like seeing women and children threatened." Hawthorne pressed down harder. "Now, do we understand each other? Your lawyers will be hearing from my lawyers. I'll take that as a yes." Hawthorne stepped back. "Eli, see Mr. Mercer and his men off the property. If any of them are still here in 5 minutes, shoot the horses." Eli grinned without humor. "Yes, sir." Mercer scrambled to his feet, his composure shattered. "This isn't over, Hawthorne. Not by a long shot." His eyes found Clara. "And you, Mrs. Sullivan. That debt won't disappear just because you've found a protector. I'll be seeing you soon." He mounted his horse and rode out. His men followed the one Hawthorne had knocked down, swaying in his saddle. Silence descended on the yard. Hawthorne turned to Clara. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes, concern maybe, or anger, made her breath catch. "You're barefoot in the snow." Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't it. Yes, I heard the fighting and—" He was moving toward her before she could finish. In one motion he swept her up in his arms and carried her back toward the house. "Mr. Hawthorne, you're going to lose those toes for certain if you keep this up." He kicked open the front door. "And my name is Jackson. Mr. Hawthorne was my father, and he was a drunk and a fool." He carried her past her wide-eyed children, past his Aunt Ida, who had appeared from somewhere with knowing eyes, and set her down in a chair by the fire. "Stay. Off. Your feet." Each word was punctuated with a look that dared her to argue. Clara didn't argue. She was too stunned. "That man," she managed. "Mercer." "Is it true? Did Henry really owe him money?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "Clayton Mercer is a snake who's been trying to steal my water rights for 15 years. He'd say anything, forge any document to get what he wants. But if it is true, then I'll handle it. It's not your debt to handle. It's not yours either." Jackson crouched beside her chair, bringing his face level with hers. "Your husband is dead, Clara. Whatever he owed, whatever mistakes he made, they died with him. You don't have to carry that." Clara stared at him. No one had ever told her that before. No one had ever suggested that Henry's failures weren't hers to shoulder. "Why are you helping me?" The question came out a whisper. "Really? The truth." Jackson was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been pain. "Because I know what it's like to be alone. To have nobody in the world who gives a damn whether you live or die." He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, especially not a mother with 5 children and nowhere to go." He left the room before she could respond. Thomas appeared at Clara's side immediately. "Mama, are you all right? Who were those men? Why did that one say Papa owed him money?" Clara pulled her eldest son close. Over his head she saw the other children watching. Ruth, with fear in her eyes. Abigail clutching her biscuit like a talisman. Samuel sucking his thumb, which he only did when frightened. And William blessedly asleep in Ruth's arms, unaware of the danger that had just passed and the danger that might still come. "Everything is fine," Clara lied. "Mr. Hawthorne is protecting us." "But for how long?" The question came from Abigail. Her daughter looked at her with eyes too old for 7 years. "How long will he protect us? Mama, people always leave. Papa left. The cabin left. How long before Mr. Jackson leaves too?" Clara had no answer, because she'd been wondering the same thing. The day passed slowly after Mercer's departure. Clara stayed by the fire, as instructed, her bandaged feet propped on a stool. The children explored the house under Ida's watchful eye, their fear fading into curiosity as they discovered the massive kitchen, The library full of books, the parlor with its piano that no one played. But Clara couldn't stop thinking about the debt. $300. It might as well have been 3,000. She didn't have it. Would never have it. And men like Clayton Mercer didn't forget what they were owed. The door opened. Jackson entered, stamping snow from his boots. How are the feet? Still attached. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. Good. Aunt Ida would never forgive me if I let you lose toes in her house. He crossed to the window, looking out at the fading light. I've sent a man to look at what's left of your cabin. See if anything survived the fire. Clara's throat tightened. There wasn't much to survive. Personal things, letters, photographs, the kind of things that matter. She stared at him. He was still looking out the window, his profile sharp against the dying light. You didn't have to do that. No, I didn't. Then why? Because my wife had a photograph of her mother. He turned to face her. She kept it by her bed. After she died, I couldn't find it anywhere. Looked for weeks. Never did find the damn thing. He shrugged, but the pain in his eyes gave the lie to his casual tone. Thought maybe you'd want to save what could be saved. Clara's heart cracked a little. This man, this hard-scarred, rumored to be heartless man, he understood loss in a way most people couldn't imagine. What was her name, your wife? Jackson was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. Margaret. Maggie. I called her. He swallowed hard. She had red hair, hated the color, said it made her look like she was on fire. I told her she was on fire. Brightest thing in any room she walked into. How long were you married? 3 years, 2 months, 11 days? He turned back to the window. But who's counting? 7 years, Clara thought. He'd been alone for 7 years, and he could still count the days of his marriage. I'm sorry. Don't be. She wouldn't have wanted sorry. She'd have wanted me to keep living. His laugh was bitter. Haven't done a great job of that, truth be told. Clara thought about Henry. 3 years of marriage, and she couldn't have told you how many days. Couldn't have described him with the kind of love Jackson clearly still felt for his Maggie. What would it be like, she wondered, to be loved that way, Mrs. Sullivan? Clara, she corrected. If you're Jackson, I'm Clara. He nodded slowly. Clara, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it. Her stomach dropped. What? Mercer's claim about your husband's debt. I had Eli check into it. Jackson met her eyes. It's real. Henry Sullivan signed a note for $300, dated 2 weeks before he died. The room spun. No, that's not possible. We didn't have money for gambling. We barely had money for food. I know. Jackson's voice was gentle. But the signature matches. I've seen enough of your husband's handwriting from the territorial records. It's his. Clara's world collapsed for the second time in 2 days. Henry had gambled away money they didn't have, had signed away their future to a man like Clayton Mercer. And then he died, leaving her to face the consequences alone. What am I going to do? Nothing. Jackson moved closer, his voice firm. You're going to stay here, heal your feet, and let me handle Mercer. It's not your. If you say it's not my problem one more time, I'm going to throw something. He knelt beside her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. Clara, listen to me. You showed up on my land half frozen with 5 children. That makes you my responsibility whether you like it or not. And I don't abandon my responsibilities. I'm not a responsibility. I'm a person. Fine, then you're a person I choose to help. Is that better? Clara's eyes burned. Why? Why do you choose to help? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. What could you possibly gain from... What could I gain? Jackson's laugh was harsh. Nothing. That's the point. I don't want anything from you, Clara. Not gratitude, not repayment, not... He stopped, something flickering across his face. Not what? He stood abruptly. Doesn't matter. Point is, Mercer's not getting his hands on you or your children. I'll pay the debt myself if I have to. $300. I have it. And you'd just give it away for a stranger. You're not a stranger. The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. Not anymore. Clara didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to feel. This man, this impossible, contradictory man, was offering to pay her husband's gambling debts. Was offering protection, shelter, safety. Was offering everything she'd never had. I can't let you do that, she said finally. It wouldn't be right. Since when is helping someone not right? Since I have nothing to offer in return. Jackson studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was rusty like machinery that hadn't been used in years, but it was real. Clara Sullivan, you just survived a fire, walked 3 miles in freezing cold, with 5 children, and stood barefoot in the snow to face down the most dangerous man in the territory. And you think you have nothing to offer? She blinked. I was stupid to come outside. You were brave. Stupid too, but mostly brave. He shook his head. I've known soldiers with less courage than you showed this morning. Clara didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to be seen as brave when she felt nothing but terrified. I'm not brave, she whispered. I'm just too stubborn to die. Same thing sometimes. Jackson moved toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. What does come next? He paused his hand on the doorframe. When he looked back at her, something in his expression made her breath catch. I don't know yet, but I know it's not you alone facing the world with nothing. His voice dropped. Not while I'm breathing. He left. Clara sat alone by the fire, her children's voices drifting from somewhere deeper in the house, her bandaged feet throbbing, her mind racing. Jackson Hawthorne was offering her everything, and she was terrified to accept it. Because the last man who'd promised her everything had died on a mountain, leaving her with debts she didn't know about and children she couldn't afford to feed. And this time, if she let herself hope, if she let herself trust, the fall would destroy her. But even as she told herself to be careful, even as she reminded herself that men couldn't be trusted, she felt something dangerous stirring in her chest. Something that felt like the beginning of love. 2 weeks passed, and Clara learned what it meant to be part of Jackson Hawthorne's world. She learned that he woke before dawn every day, no matter the weather. That he checked on her children before checking on his cattle. That he carved small wooden animals in the evenings and left them where the children would find them, never admitting he'd made them. She learned that his nightmares came every 3rd or 4th night. That he walked the halls until morning when they did. That he never spoke about what he saw in those dreams, but the haunted look in his eyes told her enough. And she learned slowly, reluctantly, that she was falling in love with him. It terrified her. You're staring again. Clara startled. Ida stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. I wasn't staring. Child, you've been watching that window for 10 minutes. Jackson's in the north pasture. He won't be back until supper. Clara's face heated. I was just thinking. Ida moved to the stove, stirring something that smelled like heaven. Thinking about a certain tall, stubborn man who can't admit he's got feelings to save his life. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. Ida set down her spoon. Clara, I've known Jackson since he was born. Watched him grow up, watched him go to war, watched him bury a wife and child. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Clara's heart stuttered. He doesn't look at me any particular way. He looks at you like you're the sunrise after 7 years of darkness. Ida's voice softened. And you look at him the same way. So why are you both pretending? Because I can't. The words burst out before Clara could stop them. I can't let myself feel something for a man again. Not after Henry. Not after he failed you. Clara flinched. She'd never said it out loud, never admitted that Henry's death had been as much relief as grief. He didn't just fail me. He failed our children. He gambled away money we needed. He made promises he couldn't keep, and in the end, he left me with nothing but debt and 5 mouths to feed. And you think Jackson is the same? I think all men are the same. Ida laughed. It wasn't unkind, but it wasn't gentle either. Child Jackson Hawthorne is many things. Stubborn, difficult, so closed off he makes rocks look friendly. But he is not Henry Sullivan, not even close. How can you be sure? Because Jackson doesn't make promises he can't keep. He makes none at all. Ida moved closer, taking Clara's hands. That man has protected you for 2 weeks, fed your children, paid your husband's debt without asking for anything in return. Does that sound like Henry? Clara's eyes burned. No. Then stop punishing Jackson for another man's sins. Ida squeezed her hands. And stop punishing yourself for daring to hope again. The kitchen door banged open. Thomas ran in breathless. Mama! Mama! There's men coming! Lots of them! Clara was on her feet before she could think. Her toes had healed enough for careful walking, but she moved faster than she should, following Thomas to the front of the house. Through the window she saw them. A dozen riders at least coming fast from the south. At their head, unmistakable even at this distance, was Clayton Mercer. Get your brothers and sisters, Clara told Thomas. Take them upstairs. Lock the door. But Mama! Now Thomas. Her son ran. Clara turned to find Ida, already pulling a rifle from above the fireplace. Can you shoot? The older woman asked. Jackson taught me. Good. Ida handed her a pistol. Because my nephew's not here, and Eli's in the south pasture with most of the men. We're on our own. Clara's hands shook as she checked the weapon. Loaded. Ready. She'd never shot at a person before. Never imagined she would. But looking out at the riders coming to claim her to take her from the only safety she'd known in months, she knew she would do whatever it took. They reached the yard before Clara could plan further. Mercer dismounted with theatrical slowness, brushing dust from his coat like he was arriving at a social gathering. Mrs. Sullivan. His smile made her skin crawl. I've come to collect what's owed. Clara stepped onto the porch pistol hidden in the folds of her skirt. I don't owe you anything. Jackson Hawthorne paid my husband's debt. Ah yes, the $300. Mercer's eyes glittered. But there's been interest, you see. Late fees. Administrative costs. The total now stands at $500, payable immediately. That's robbery. That's business. Mercer stepped closer. Now we can do this the easy way. You come with me, work off the debt at my establishment. Your children stay here well cared for. Everyone's happy. And the hard way? The hard way involves my men searching this house for valuables, breaking things that get in the way, perhaps frightening those beautiful children of yours. His voice dropped. I hear the baby cries at night. Babies are so fragile, Mrs. Sullivan. So easy to... Quiet. Clara's blood turned to ice. He was threatening her children, threatening William, her baby, her heart. The pistol was in her hand before she consciously decided to draw it. Get off this property. Mercer's eyebrows rose. You're going to shoot me. If you take one more step toward my children, I will shoot you. And then I will shoot every man you brought with you. And I will not miss. Something flickered across Mercer's face. Uncertainty, maybe. Or respect. Mrs. Sullivan, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Clara's voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. She'd found something deeper than fear, a rage so pure it burned like fire. I have lost my husband. I have lost my home. I will not lose my children. Brave words from a woman alone. She ain't alone. Clara's heart leaped. Jackson rode into the yard at full gallop, his black horse foaming from the run. Behind him came Eli and a dozen ranch hands, all armed, all looking ready for war. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped putting himself between Clara and Mercer. Clayton, I thought I told you what would happen if you came back. You told me many things, Hawthorne. None of them scared me. That's because you're stupid. Jackson's voice was calm, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. You've got 12 men. I've got 12 men. Even odds. Except my men know this land know how to shoot and know they're protecting women and children. What do your men know? Mercer's smile faltered. He glanced at his hired guns, and Clara saw doubt in some of their faces. This isn't over, Hawthorne. No, it's not. Jackson stepped forward. But it's not going to end with you stealing a widow and threatening children. It's going to end in a courtroom with your forged debt papers examined by real lawyers. Papers I've already sent copies of to the territorial judge. Mercer's face went pale. You're bluffing. Am I? The judge is a friend of mine. Served with him in the war. He's very interested in how a dead man's signature ended up on a document dated after his death. Clara's breath caught. After his death. What are you talking about? She demanded. Jackson glanced at her, something fierce in his eyes. Your husband died March 15th. That gambling debt is dated March 20th. Hard for a dead man to sign anything. The world tilted. You forged it, Clara whispered, staring at Mercer. You forged my husband's signature. He never owed you anything. Mercer's composure cracked. That's a lie. It's the truth, and you know it. Jackson's voice cut like a blade. You saw a widow alone, unprotected, and you thought you could take what you wanted. You've done it before. The Miller family, the Hendricks widow. How many women have you terrorized into submission? Murmurs ran through Mercer's men. Clara saw several of them exchange uncomfortable glances. I don't have to listen to this. Mercer mounted his horse. We're leaving. But this isn't over, Hawthorne. Not by a long shot. Clayton. Jackson's voice stopped him. If you come near this ranch again, if you come near Clara or her children, I won't wait for judges or lawyers. I'll end you myself. And unlike you, I don't bluff. For one terrible moment, Clara thought Mercer would draw his gun. She could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing whether he could kill Jackson before Jackson's men opened fire. Then the moment passed. Mercer kicked his horse and rode out, his men following in ragged formation. Silence fell over the yard. Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the porch steps, the pistol clattering from her nerveless fingers. Jackson was beside her in an instant. Clara. Clara, look at me. She looked. His face swam before her, blurred by tears she hadn't known were falling. He forged it. Henry didn't. My husband wasn't. No. Jackson's hands cupped her face, gentle despite their roughness. Your husband didn't gamble. Mercer saw an opportunity and tried to take it. But it's over now. Do you hear me? It's over. He threatened my children. He said he'd hurt William. He won't touch them. I swear to you, Clara, I will die before I let anyone hurt your children. She believed him. God help her, she believed every word. I drew a gun on him. The realization hit her like cold water. I pointed a gun at a man. I would have shot him. I know. Something in Jackson's voice made her look at him more closely. I saw you through the window. That's why I rode so hard. I thought... He stopped, swallowed. I thought I was going to lose you. You were worried about me. Terrified. The word came out rough, torn. Clara, I was terrified. When I saw you standing there with that pistol facing down Mercer and his men. I've never been so scared in my life. Not even in the war. Why? He was silent for a long moment. Around them, the ranch hands dispersed, giving them privacy with the particular tact of people who knew when to make themselves scarce. Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks, Jackson finally said, "You became the most important thing in my world. And I don't know how to live with that." Clara's heart stopped. Jackson. I know. He pulled back, putting distance between them. I know you're not ready. I know you're scared. Hell, I'm scared too. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I feel. What do you feel? Everything. The word was barely a whisper. I feel everything when I look at you. And it's been so long since I felt anything at all. Clara reached for him before she could think better of it. Her hand found his, and she held on tight. I'm not ready, she said honestly. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I don't want you to stop. Stop what? Feeling. Looking at me like I matter. Her voice cracked. No one's ever looked at me the way you do. Like I'm worth something. You are worth something. Jackson's free hand came up to brush a tear from her cheek. You're worth everything. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe they both did. But suddenly his lips were on hers, gentle and desperate all at once, and Clara was kissing him back with everything she had. It wasn't like kissing Henry. Henry's kisses had been tentative, unsure, like he was always waiting for permission. Jackson kissed like he did everything else. Completely. Without reservation. Like she was the only thing that mattered in the entire world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara saw something in his eyes that made her heart crack open. Hope. The same terrified, desperate hope she felt in her own chest. I'm going to mess this up, he warned her. Probably. I don't know how to be soft, how to be what you need. I don't need soft. I need honest. I can do honest. He pressed his forehead against hers. I honestly don't know what I'm doing. I honestly haven't felt this way since Maggie. And I honestly think you might be the death of me. Clara laughed a wet, broken sound. That's not very romantic. I told you I'd mess it up. You're doing fine. She kissed him again, softer this time. Better than fine. Mama. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Thomas stood in the doorway, his siblings crowded behind him. All 5 children stared with wide eyes at their mother and the man who'd saved them. Are you kissing Mr. Jackson? Abigail asked with 7-year-old directness. Clara's face flamed. Abigail! I knew it! Thomas crossed his arms. I told Ruth. I said Mama likes Mr. Jackson, and Ruth said I was stupid, but I knew it. You are stupid, Ruth shot back. I said Mama was being careful. Children, Clara started. Does this mean Mr. Jackson is going to be our new papa? Samuel's small voice cut through the chaos. Silence fell. Clara looked at Jackson. Jackson looked at Clara. And then to her shock, Jackson knelt down to meet Samuel's eyes. Would that be all right with you? He asked quietly. If I was your papa. Samuel considered this with 3-year-old solemnity. Do you have candy? Jackson's lips twitched. I can get candy. Then okay. The other children remained silent, watching. Thomas's face was unreadable. Ruth looked thoughtful. Abigail was already smiling, and William in Ruth's arms simply drooled contentedly. Mr. Jackson. Thomas stepped forward, and Clara saw Henry in him, the serious set of his jaw, the protective stance. If you hurt my mama, I'll hurt you. I don't care how big you are. Jackson met the boy's eyes without flinching. Fair enough. And I'll tell you the same thing I told her. I don't know how to be soft. I don't know how to be a father. But I will protect your family with my life. That's a promise. Thomas studied him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. But I'm watching you. I'd expect nothing less. The tension broke. Abigail launched herself at Jackson, wrapping her arms around his legs. Ruth followed more cautiously, and Samuel toddled over to join the pile. Even Thomas unbent enough to stand beside them rather than apart. Clara watched her children embrace the man she was falling in love with, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. Not a place. Not walls and a roof. But people. Safety. Belonging. This was home. The next morning brought complications. Clara woke to raised voices in the yard. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find Jackson and Eli in heated discussion near the barn. He's got the sheriff on his payroll, Eli was saying. Always has. This is just him using the law as a weapon." "What's going on?" Clara demanded. Jackson turned. His face was grim. "Mercer's filed a complaint with the sheriff. Claims I assaulted him yesterday. They're coming to arrest me." Clara's blood went cold. "He can't do that." "He can if he's bought the sheriff." "And he has." Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "I've got maybe an hour before they get here." "Then run, hide. You can't let them take you." "If I run, I look guilty. And Mercer wins." Jackson's jaw set. "I'm not running." "Jackson." "Clara." He took her hands. "I need you to trust me. I've already sent word to Judge Harrison in Cheyenne. He's an honest man. He'll see through Mercer's lies, but it might take a few days for him to get here." "A few days? You'll be in jail for a few days." "It's the best option. If I fight, people get hurt. If I run, I lose everything: the ranch, my reputation, my chance to bring Mercer down legally." He squeezed her hands. "I need you to stay here. Keep the children safe. Aunt Ida will help you." "And if something happens to you in that jail?" "It won't." "You don't know that." "I know that Mercer wants me destroyed, not dead. Dead makes me a martyr. Destroyed makes me nothing." Jackson's smile was grim. "I've survived worse than a few days in jail." The riders appeared on the horizon before Clara could argue further. 5 men led by a heavy-set figure with a sheriff's star on his chest. "Jackson Hawthorne," the sheriff's voice carried across the yard. "I've got a warrant for your arrest. Assault and battery. Come peacefully." Jackson pressed a kiss to Clara's forehead. "Wait for me." "I'll do more than wait." He looked at her questioningly, but there was no time. The sheriff was dismounting his deputies, spreading out with hands on their weapons. Clara watched them take Jackson Hawthorne away in chains, and something hardened in her heart. She was done being helpless, done being the woman who waited for men to solve her problems. If the law was corrupt, she would find another way. "Eli." She turned to the foreman. "I need a horse, and I need you to tell me everything you know about Clayton Mercer." Eli's eyebrows rose. "Ma'am?" "You heard me. Everything. His business dealings, his enemies, his secrets. Every piece of dirt you've ever heard whispered in a saloon." A slow smile spread across Eli's face. "You're not going to wait for the judge, are you?" "I'm going to make sure there's something for the judge to hear." She found what she needed 3 days later. 3 days of barely sleeping. 3 days of questioning ranch hands, visiting town under cover of darkness, piecing together the ugly truth of Clayton Mercer's empire. He'd cheated the Hendricks widow out of her land, forged papers, bribed officials exactly like he'd tried with Clara. But there was a difference. Mrs. Hendricks was still alive. Clara found her in a boarding house in Cheyenne, a shadow of a woman who'd lost everything. But she had something Mercer hadn't counted on. Evidence. Letters her husband had written before his suspicious death. Documents that didn't match the ones Mercer had filed. Witnesses who'd been too scared to speak until now. Clara arrived at the Clearwater Courthouse on the morning of Jackson's hearing. Judge Harrison presiding with enough ammunition to destroy Clayton Mercer completely. The judge was an older man with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. He listened as the sheriff presented Mercer's complaint. He listened as Mercer's lawyer painted Jackson as a violent, unstable man who attacked innocent businessmen. And then Clara stood. "Your Honor, I have evidence that Clayton Mercer has been systematically defrauding widows throughout this territory for over a decade." The courtroom erupted. "Order!" Harrison banged his gavel. "Mrs. Sullivan, you may approach." Clara walked forward on legs that trembled but didn't buckle. She handed the judge her folder of evidence, explained each piece, and watched Mercer's face grow paler with every word. When she reached the forged gambling debt, the one supposedly signed by Henry 5 days after his death, Mercer rose from his seat. "This is ridiculous. The woman is lying to protect her lover." "Sit down, Mr. Mercer." Harrison's voice was ice. "Or I'll have you removed." You can't possibly believe. I believe evidence, Mr. Mercer, and the evidence Mrs. Sullivan has presented is damning. The judge studied the papers. A signature dated after the signer's death. Multiple complaints from widows you've allegedly defrauded. Testimony from your own former employees about forged documents and bribed officials. Mercer's composure cracked. Those people are lying. They've been paid off by Hawthorne. The people haven't been paid by anyone. Clara's voice rang out. They're telling the truth because they're tired of being afraid. Because they've watched you steal from the vulnerable for years, and they're finally ready to fight back. She turned to face Mercer directly, and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. You thought I was weak. You thought I had nothing. But you forgot something, Mr. Mercer. Clara's voice dropped. A mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Clayton Mercer, I'm dismissing all charges against Jackson Hawthorne. Furthermore, I'm issuing a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Sheriff, the real sheriff, not the man you've been paying, will be taking you into custody. Mercer lunged for the door. He didn't make it 3 steps. Jackson was there, freed from his cell the moment the charges were dismissed. He caught Mercer with one hand and slammed him against the wall. Remember what I told you. Jackson's voice was quiet, deadly. About what would happen if you came near Clara again. Hawthorne, please. You threatened her children. You tried to take everything from her. And now you're going to pay for it, not with blood, though God knows you deserve it. With time. Years. Behind bars. He released Mercer. The disgraced businessman collapsed, all his power and arrogance stripped away in an instant. The courtroom cleared slowly. Deputies led Mercer away. The corrupt sheriff was arrested alongside him. And finally, only Clara and Jackson remained. You saved me, Jackson said quietly. You saved me first. I meant what I said. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I don't know how to be soft. And I told you I don't need soft. Clara reached up to touch his face. I need you, Jackson, just as you are. He kissed her then, in the middle of the empty courtroom, with all the passion and desperation of a man who'd finally stopped running from love. When they broke apart, Clara saw something in his eyes she'd never expected to find. Peace. Marry me, he said. Clara's heart stopped. What? Marry me. You and the children. Become my family. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. Jackson, it's only been 3 weeks. 3 weeks, 3 years. What's the difference? He took her hands. I love you, Clara Sullivan. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you stare at me when you think I'm not looking. I love your children like they're my own. And I don't want to waste any more time pretending I don't. Clara looked at this man, scarred, damaged, difficult, and saw everything she'd ever wanted. Yes. The word came out before she could second-guess it, before fear could talk her out of taking the greatest risk of her life. Jackson's face transformed. The hard lines softened. The guarded eyes opened. And for the first time since she'd known him, Clara saw Jackson Hawthorne truly smile. Yes, he repeated. Yes, I'll marry you. Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. But I'm warning you, I come with 5 children, a stubborn streak, and no idea how to be a rancher's wife. I'll teach you. And if I'm terrible at it, then we'll be terrible together. He pulled her close. I don't care about perfect Clara. I just care about you. She kissed him again, and this time it felt like coming home. The wedding was set for 2 weeks later. Clara had wanted something simple. A quiet ceremony with just the family. But word traveled fast in Wyoming territory, and by the time Sunday morning arrived, half of Clearwater had descended on Hawthorne Ranch. I blame Ida, Jackson muttered, watching another wagon roll through the gates. She invited the entire territory. She invited people who care about you. Clara straightened his collar. Whether you like it or not, Jackson Hawthorne, you matter to this community. I'm antisocial. You're difficult. There's a difference. His lips twitched. You sound like my aunt. Your aunt is a wise woman. The barn had been transformed into something Clara barely recognized. Lanterns hung from every beam. Wildflowers preserved somehow through the winter decorated the makeshift altar. And the people, ranchers and townspeople, shop owners and farmers, filled every available space. But Clara only had eyes for one person. Jackson stood at the altar in his best suit, looking uncomfortable and terrified, and absolutely perfect. Beside him, Eli served as best man, his usual stoic expression softened by something that looked suspiciously like emotion. "Mama!" Thomas tugged her sleeve. "It's time." Clara looked at her eldest son. He'd volunteered to walk her down the aisle, and the responsibility sat heavily on his thin shoulders. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "About him?" "I'm sure. Because if you're not, we can run. I'll get the horses. We'll be in Cheyenne before anyone notices." Clara's heart cracked with love for this boy who'd grown up too fast. "Thomas, look at me." Serious gray eyes met hers. "Jackson Hawthorne is not your father. He's not going to leave us. He's not going to fail us. I know you're scared. I know you don't trust easily anymore. But I need you to try." Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, Mama, I'll try." They walked together through the barn doors. Clara heard gasps, murmurs of approval, but none of it registered. She saw only Jackson, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When they reached the altar, Thomas placed Clara's hand in Jackson's. Then he did something unexpected. He looked at Jackson and said quietly but clearly, "Take care of her, or I'll make you regret it." Jackson nodded solemnly. "You have my word." Thomas stepped back to join his siblings in the front row. Ruth held William, who was chewing contentedly on a wooden horse. Abigail clutched a bouquet of winter berries, and Samuel had already fallen asleep against Ruth's shoulder. The preacher cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved." Clara barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at Jackson, this man who'd ridden through fire to save her, who'd fought for her children, who'd opened his closed-off heart and let her in. "Do you, Jackson Nathaniel Hawthorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." No hesitation, no uncertainty. "And do you, Clara Josephine Sullivan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's voice caught. For just a moment, Henry's face flashed before her. Not the broken man he'd become, but the hopeful boy she'd married 10 years ago. He'd loved her in his way. He'd tried in his way. But trying wasn't enough. Not for her. Not for their children. "I do." Jackson slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. His hands trembled slightly, and that small sign of vulnerability meant more to Clara than any grand gesture could have. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jackson kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Around them, the barn erupted in cheers and applause. But Clara was lost in the warmth of his arms, the taste of his lips, the absolute certainty that she'd finally found where she belonged. When they broke apart, Jackson whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Hawthorne." Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, husband." The celebration that followed was chaos. Fiddle music filled the barn. Food appeared from nowhere. Roasted meats and fresh bread and pies that seemed to multiply every time Clara looked away. Ranch hands danced with townswomen. Children ran screaming between the adults. And at the center of it all, Jackson Hawthorne was actually smiling. "I've never seen him like this." Ida appeared at Clara's elbow, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Not since before the war. You've given him something I thought he'd lost forever." "What's that? Joy?" Ida squeezed Clara's hand. "You've given him joy." Clara watched her husband swing Abigail in a clumsy dance while Ruth clapped along. He was terrible at dancing, stiff and awkward, stepping on his own feet as often as the floor. But Abigail was laughing so hard she could barely stand. "He's going to be a good father," Clara said. "He's going to be a wonderful father. He just needs to believe it." The celebration continued into the evening. By the time the last guests departed, Clara was exhausted in the best possible way. The children had been put to bed by Ida hours ago, and the ranch had settled into peaceful quiet. Jackson found Clara on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching stars appear one by one. "You should be inside. It's cold." "I like the cold now." Clara smiled. "It reminds me that I'm alive." He sat beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. "Any regrets?" "Not one. Even though I'm difficult. Especially because you're difficult." She leaned against him. "I don't want easy, Jackson. I want real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply. After a while, Jackson spoke. "I need to tell you something." Clara's heart stuttered. "That sounds serious." "It is." He took a breath. "The nightmares. The ones I have. You don't have to." "I do." He turned to face her. "You're my wife now. You deserve to know what you're dealing with." Clara waited. "In the war, I did things. Things I'm not proud of." His voice was rough. "I commanded men, good men. Some of them died because of orders I gave. Some of them, I had to kill them myself when they were too wounded to save." Clara's throat tightened. "Jackson." "There was a boy, 17 years old. Lied about his age to enlist. Got shot through the gut during a skirmish. Nothing I could do but hold his hand while he died." Jackson's eyes were distant, seeing something Clara couldn't see. "He asked for his mother. Kept calling for her. I couldn't. I just held him and lied. Told him his mother was coming. Told him everything would be all right." "That wasn't a lie. It was mercy." "Maybe. But I see his face every night. Him and all the others. The men I saved and the men I couldn't." Clara took his hand. "Is that why you saved us? Me and the children?" "Partly." He met her eyes. "When I heard crying through the smoke, something in me knew. Knew that if I let another person die when I could have saved them, it would destroy whatever was left of my soul. And now? Now I have you, and the children, and a reason to keep fighting the nightmares instead of drowning in them." He squeezed her hand. "You saved me, Clara. You and your beautiful, stubborn, impossible children." Clara kissed him softly. "Then we saved each other." The first test came 3 days later. Clara was in the kitchen with Ida when Thomas burst through the door. "Mama, there's a man at the gate. Says he's here about Mr. Mercer." Jackson was on his feet in an instant. "Stay here. Jackson, stay. Here." He was gone before Clara could argue. She moved to the window, watching as Jackson strode toward the gate. A single rider waited there, young, nervous, his horse dancing beneath him. "Ma'am?" Eli appeared at her elbow. "I'll keep an eye on the situation." "Who is he?" "Don't know, but the boss can handle himself." Clara watched as Jackson spoke with the stranger. Their conversation was too distant to hear, but she saw Jackson's posture shift. Surprise first, then something darker. When Jackson returned, his face was grim. "Mercer's dead." Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" "Hanged himself in his cell last night." Jackson's voice was flat. "Left a letter. Confessing to everything, the fraud, the forgeries, the bribery. Named every official he'd paid off." "Then it's really over." "Not quite." Jackson pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The letter was addressed to multiple people. I was one of them. He handed it to Clara. She opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was cramped, angry. "Hawthorne. You took everything from me. My business, my reputation, my freedom. But you didn't take my satisfaction. I want you to know that your precious widow was never the target. You were. You and your holier-than-thou attitude, your refusal to be bought, your goddamn integrity. I wanted to destroy you. She was just the weapon. And now that I've failed, I want you to live with that. I want you to wonder every day if she would have been safe without you. If your protection made her a target. If loving you put her in danger. Rot in that certainty, Hawthorne. It's all I have left." Clara's hands shook as she lowered the letter. "He's wrong," she said. Jackson's jaw was tight. "Is he? Jackson, look at me." She grabbed his arms, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I was in danger before you. I lost my home before you. My husband died before you. None of it is your fault. But if I hadn't? If you hadn't found me, I'd be dead. My children would be dead. Don't you dare let a dead man's spite make you question what you did." Jackson was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the tension drained from his shoulders. "You're very bossy for a new bride. Get used to it." He almost smiled. "Mercer's letter goes to the judge. It confirms everything. The officials he named will face charges. And us, we're free." Jackson pulled her close. "Really free. No more threats. No more looking over our shoulders. It's done." Clara pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him leather and soap, and something uniquely Jackson. "Then let's start living." Spring came slowly to Wyoming. The snow melted inch by stubborn inch, revealing brown grass that would soon turn green. Calves were born. Foals took their first wobbly steps, and the Hawthorne household settled into something that felt remarkably like normal. Clara learned to run a ranch house. It wasn't easy, she'd never managed more than a 2-room cabin before, but Ida was a patient teacher, and the ranch hands were surprisingly helpful. Jackson learned to be a father. That was harder. He'd had no model to follow, and his instincts were often wrong. But he tried. God, how he tried. "Papa." The word still made Jackson freeze every time Abigail said it. She'd been the first to use it 2 weeks after the wedding. The other children had followed gradually. Ruth, then Samuel, then even William, who couldn't say it properly, but babbled something close. Only Thomas held back. "Give him time," Clara told Jackson. "He's protecting himself." From what? From hoping, from trusting, from loving someone who might leave. Jackson's jaw tightened. "I won't leave." "I know. He'll figure that out eventually." The breakthrough came in April. Thomas had been helping Jackson repair a fence in the north pasture. They'd worked in silence for hours. Jackson had learned that pushing Thomas only made him retreat further. Then Thomas spoke. "My real father used to make promises." Jackson stopped hammering. "What kind of promises?" "All kinds. That we'd move to a real house. That he'd teach me to ride. That he'd stop drinking." Thomas's voice was flat. "He never kept any of them." "Thomas, I know you're different." The boy's hands stilled on the fence post. "I see how you look at Mama. How you play with Abigail and Ruth. How you carry William around like he's made of glass. But I keep waiting." Thomas finally looked at Jackson, and his eyes were ancient with pain. "I keep waiting for you to leave too." Jackson set down his hammer. He moved to crouch in front of Thomas, bringing their eyes level. "I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. Not your mother, not my aunt, no one." Thomas waited. "When I came back from the war, I thought about dying. Every day. For months. I'd survived when better men hadn't, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought maybe I should fix that. Even things out." Thomas's eyes widened. "What stopped you?" "A horse. This half-wild stallion that nobody could break. I spent 3 months working with him, earning his trust inch by inch. And one day, he let me ride him. Just let me. Like he'd decided I was worth trusting." Jackson's voice roughened. "That horse taught me something. He'd been hurt by people. Had every reason to never trust again. But he chose to. He chose to believe that this time would be different." "What happened to him?" "He's in the south pasture right now. Big black stallion. The one your mother said looked like he was made of midnight." Thomas's mouth fell open. "That's the horse you rode through the fire." Same one. We saved each other, him and me. Jackson met Thomas's eyes. Now I'm asking you to do what that horse did. I'm asking you to choose to trust me. Not because I've earned it, I haven't, not yet. But because sometimes you have to believe before you have proof. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Jackson could see him wrestling with years of disappointment, years of broken promises, years of learning that hope was dangerous. Then the boy straightened his shoulders. Okay. I'll try. That's what Mama said I should try. Thomas's jaw set with familiar stubbornness. But if you hurt her, I meant what I said. I don't care how big you are. Jackson bit back a smile. I remember. They went back to the fence, working side by side. The silence was different now, less wary, almost comfortable. When they returned to the house that evening, Thomas did something he'd never done before. He hugged Jackson. It was quick, awkward, barely a second. But it happened. Clara saw it from the kitchen window. Her eyes filled with tears. That night, after the children were asleep, she found Jackson on the porch with his eternal carving. What are you making? Something for Thomas. He held up a half-finished wooden horse. Thought he might like his own. Clara sat beside him watching his hands work. He hugged you today. He did. You know what that means? That he's starting to trust me. That you're his father now. Really, his father. Clara leaned against his shoulder. He doesn't give hugs to just anyone. Jackson's hands stilled. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I never thought I'd have this again. A family, children, a wife who actually wants to be with me. Did Margaret not want to be with you? Margaret was complicated. He set down the carving. She loved me. I believe that. But she never wanted this life. She came west for adventure, found reality instead. I think she was relieved at the end. Relieved to die. Relieved to stop trying to be someone she wasn't. Jackson's voice held old pain. I couldn't save her. Not from childbirth, not from her own unhappiness. I've carried that failure for 7 years. And now I have you. He turned to look at her. You're nothing like Margaret. You don't want adventure, you want stability. You don't need saving, you need partnership. And I think I can give you that. Clara kissed him softly. You already are. Summer brought changes. The ranch thrived under Jackson's management and Clara's domestic oversight. Thomas learned to ride properly, spending hours with Eli and the ranch hands. Ruth discovered a talent for numbers that made her invaluable in keeping the household accounts. Abigail adopted every injured animal she found, turning a corner of the barn into an informal infirmary. Samuel and William grew like weeds, running and toddling through the house with abandon that made Ida constantly threaten to retire. And Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Jackson on a warm July evening sitting on their porch while the sun painted the sky orange and pink. You're what? Pregnant with child, having a baby. Clara smiled at his stunned expression. Do I need to explain how it happened? No, Jackson ran a hand through his hair. A baby. A real baby. They're generally real, yes. But I thought... He stopped. Margaret's pregnancy was difficult from the start. The doctor said... He stopped again. Clara took his hand. I'm not Margaret, and this isn't that pregnancy. We'll be careful. We'll have the best doctors. What if something goes wrong? What if nothing goes wrong? Clara moved closer. Jackson, look at me. I've had 5 healthy pregnancies. I know my body. I know the signs of trouble. And I have you this time, someone who will actually take care of me. Jackson's hand came to rest on her still flat stomach. A baby, he whispered. Ours. Ours. He kissed her then, tender and fierce, and full of a joy she'd never expected to see on his face. "I'm terrified," he admitted when they broke apart. "Me too. I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I." "What if I mess it up?" Clara laughed. "You probably will. I probably will too. That's what parents do, mess up and try again and love their children through the mistakes." "Is that what your parents did?" Clara's laughter faded. "My mother did, before she died. My father sold me to Henry when I was 16. So no, that's not what he did." Jackson's expression darkened. "I didn't know that. It was a long time ago. He's dead now." Clara shook her head. "I used to be angry. Now I'm just grateful. If he hadn't sold me to Henry, I wouldn't have my children. And without my children, I wouldn't have ended up here. With you." "That's a generous way to look at it. It's the only way to look at it that doesn't drive me crazy." Clara leaned into him. "We can't change the past, Jackson. We can only build a better future." He held her close as the sun set and the stars emerged. Around them, the ranch settled into evening quiet. Children's laughter drifted from the house where Ida was undoubtedly trying to get them ready for bed. This was life now. Imperfect and complicated, and absolutely perfect. "I love you," Jackson said quietly. "I know." "No, I mean—" He turned her to face him. "I've said it before, but I need you to understand. I love you differently than I loved Margaret. More fully, more freely." "What do you mean?" "With Margaret, love felt like obligation, like something I owed her. I loved her because she was my wife, because she needed me, because that's what husbands do." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "With you, love feels like choice. Like every day I wake up and choose you again. Not because I have to, but because I can't imagine choosing anyone else." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Jackson Hawthorne, you said you weren't good with words." "I'm not. These are the only ones I have." "They're enough." She kissed him softly. "They're more than enough." Above them, stars wheeled in their eternal patterns. Inside, children laughed and argued and prepared for sleep. And on the porch of the house that fire and fate had led them to, Jackson and Clara Hawthorne held each other and believed finally completely in the future they would build together. The past was behind them. The fire was just a memory, and ahead lay nothing but possibility, wide and open as the Wyoming sky. The baby came early. Clara woke at midnight to pain that stole her breath. She lay still for a moment, counting the seconds between contractions, telling herself it was false labor. Too soon. 3 weeks too soon. Then her water broke. "Jackson!" He was awake in an instant, years of war training snapping him to alertness. "What is it?" "The baby's coming." 3 words. 3 words that turned Jackson Hawthorne into a man she barely recognized. His face went white. His hands shook. And when he spoke, his voice cracked like a boy's. "It's too early. Clara, it's too early." "I know." She grabbed his arm as another contraction hit. "But this baby doesn't care about timing. Get Ida. Now." He was gone before she finished speaking. The next hours blurred together in waves of pain and fear. Ida took charge immediately, shooing Jackson out of the room, despite his protests, ordering Ruth to boil water and Thomas to ride for the doctor in town. "He won't get here in time," Clara gasped between contractions. "The baby's coming fast." "Then we'll deliver this baby ourselves." Ida's voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who'd seen birth and death and everything in between. "I've done it before. You trust me?" "Yes." "Then push when I tell you. And don't you dare give up." Clara pushed. The pain was worse than any of her previous births. Maybe because she was older now. Maybe because the baby was early. Maybe because Jackson's fear had infected her, making every contraction feel like a step toward disaster. "I can't," she sobbed after an hour. "Ida, I can't." "You can and you will." Ida's face appeared above her. Clara Hawthorne. You survived a fire. You walked through freezing cold with 5 children. You faced down Clayton Mercer with a pistol in your hand. You are not going to let this baby beat you. Jackson. Jackson is wearing a hole in the floor outside. You want me to let him in? No. Clara's jaw set. Not until it's over. She pushed again. The door burst open. Jackson stood there wild-eyed, ignoring Ida's outraged shout. I can't stay out there. I can't. He crossed to Clara's side, taking her hand. I'm here. I'm not leaving. Jackson, this isn't proper. I don't care about proper. He looked at his wife, seeing the fear she was trying to hide. I lost Margaret because I wasn't there. I was in the other room, waiting, trusting the doctor. I won't make that mistake again. Clara squeezed his hand so hard she felt bones grind together. I'm scared. So am I. He kissed her forehead. But we're scared together. That's the difference. Another contraction. Another push. And then, I see the head. Ida's voice sharpened with focus. One more, Clara. One more big push. Clara screamed. She pushed with everything she had, with every ounce of strength left in her body. Jackson held her hand and whispered words she couldn't hear, and somewhere in the distance, a new voice joined the chaos. A baby crying. It's a girl. Ida's voice cracked with emotion. A beautiful, healthy girl. Clara collapsed against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. Jackson stared at the tiny, squalling bundle in Ida's arms like he'd never seen anything so miraculous. A girl, he whispered. We have a daughter. Ida placed the baby in Clara's arms. She was small. Too small, Clara thought, with a flare of worry, but her cry was strong, and her tiny fists waved with furious energy. She's perfect. Clara touched the baby's face, counting fingers and toes. Jackson, look at her. Jackson looked, and something in his expression shattered. He sank to his knees beside the bed, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. Clara realized with a start that he was crying. Jackson Hawthorne, who'd survived war and loss and 7 years of isolation, was weeping over his newborn daughter. I thought I'd lost you. His voice was barely audible. When you started pushing when you were in so much pain, I thought it was happening again. But it didn't. Clara touched his face, wiping tears with her thumb. I'm here. She's here. We're both here. Jackson lifted his head. His eyes were red, his face wet, and he'd never looked more beautiful to Clara than in that moment. What should we name her? Clara looked at the baby, their baby, this new life they'd created together. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope. Jackson laughed a wet, broken sound. Hope. That's perfect. He leaned down to kiss his daughter's forehead, then his wife's lips. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not leaving me. Never, Clara promised. Never. The doctor arrived 3 hours later, full of apologies about the weather and the roads. He examined Hope and pronounced her small but healthy, a miracle, given how early she'd come. You're a strong woman, Mrs. Hawthorne. He packed up his bag. Most women in your position wouldn't have survived a birth like that. I had help. Clara glanced at Jackson, who hadn't left her side since Hope was born. The best kind. The children were allowed in one at a time. Thomas came first, his face carefully neutral, until he saw his baby sister. Then something softened in his expression. She's tiny. She's early. She'll grow. Thomas reached out hesitantly, touching Hope's small hand. The baby's fingers curled around his, and Thomas's composure cracked entirely. She grabbed me. Mama, she grabbed me. She knows you're her brother. Ruth came next, then Abigail, then Samuel, who couldn't quite understand what was happening, but knew it was important. William was too young to visit, but Ida brought him to the doorway so he could see the new addition to the family. 6 children now, Jackson said quietly, watching them cluster around Clara's bed. 6. Scared? Terrified. He smiled. But the good kind of terrified. The weeks that followed tested them all. Hope was small and struggled to nurse. Clara spent long nights walking with her, singing the same lullabies she'd sung to her other babies, praying for the tiny girl to thrive. Jackson learned to change diapers, to rock a fussy infant, to survive on no sleep while still running a ranch. Eli took over most of the daily operations, freeing Jackson to focus on his family. "You look like death warmed over," Eli observed one morning. "I feel like death froze over and then thawed out wrong." Jackson rubbed his eyes. How did anyone ever survive having babies? Most folks don't have 6 at once. I didn't have 6 at once. They accumulated. Eli snorted. Same result. You getting any sleep? What sleep? That thing you used to do before you had 6 children and a wife who needs you. Jackson would have argued, but he was too tired. Hope turned 3 months old on a crisp September morning. She'd grown, finally catching up to where she should have been. Her cry was still strong, her grip still fierce, and she'd developed an absolute devotion to Thomas of all people. "She stares at me," Thomas complained one afternoon. "Every time I walk by, she just stares." "She adores you." Clara shifted Hope to her other shoulder. "You're her big brother." "I'm everyone's big brother. I was Ruth's big brother, and she doesn't stare at me like that." "Ruth is 5. Hope is 3 months. Give her time." Thomas grumbled but reached out to take Hope when she fussed. The baby settled immediately against his chest. "How do you do that?" Clara asked. "Do what?" "Calm her. She fusses for me, fusses for Jackson, but the second you hold her, she's quiet." Thomas shrugged, but Clara saw the pride he was trying to hide. "Maybe I'm just better at it." "Maybe you are." Fall turned to winter. Their second winter together, and this time Clara faced it without fear. The ranch house was warm and solid. Food filled the cellar. And everywhere she looked, she saw evidence of the life they'd built. Jackson's carvings on every shelf, the children's drawings pinned to every wall, Hope's tiny clothes drying by the fire. "Happy?" Jackson asked one evening, finding Clara alone in the parlor. "More than I ever thought possible." "I have something for you." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I've been working on it for a while. Wanted to wait until the right moment." Clara opened the paper, her breath caught. It was a deed. Official legal bearing the territorial seal. And it transferred half of Hawthorne Ranch, 20,000 acres, into her name. "Jackson, I can't." "You can. You should." He moved closer. "When I die, everything would have gone to you anyway. But I don't want you to have to wait for that. I want you to own this land now as an equal partner." "But why?" "Because you're not my wife. You're my partner. And partners share everything, the work, the rewards, the risks." He touched her face. "I never want you to feel dependent on me, Clara. I never want you to stay because you have nowhere else to go. I want you to stay because you choose to." Clara's eyes burned. "I'll always choose to." "I know, but now you'll choose with half a ranch in your name and no debts to anyone." Jackson's voice roughened. "That's the gift you gave me, you know. The same one I'm trying to give you." "What gift?" "Freedom. The freedom to love without obligation. The freedom to stay without strings." He kissed her softly. "The freedom to be truly, completely yourself, and to be loved for exactly who you are." Clara pulled him close, the deed crumpled between them. "I love you, Jackson Hawthorne." "I know. I love you too, Clara Hawthorne. More than I ever thought I could love anyone again." Spring arrived with violent force that year. Storms rolled through the territory, flooding creeks and washing out roads. The ranch lost a dozen cattle to the chaos, and Jackson spent long days in the saddle managing the crisis. But when he came home each night exhausted and mud-covered, the first thing he did was find Clara. "You're filthy," she told him. "You're beautiful." Those two statements don't relate to each other. "They relate because I've been thinking about you all day. He kissed her, leaving mud on her cheek. Missing you all day, counting the hours until I could come home to you. Sentimental. Your fault. You made me this way. The storms passed. Summer came golden and warm. Hope took her first steps on Clara's birthday, toddling across the parlor floor with fierce determination before collapsing into Jackson's arms. "Did you see that?" Jackson shouted. "Did you see her walk?" "We all saw it, Papa." Thomas rolled his eyes with 9-year-old sophistication. "You don't have to yell." "I absolutely have to yell. My daughter just walked. Where's the appropriate response to that?" "Maybe don't deafen us." Jackson scooped Hope up, spinning her around until she giggled. Clara watched them, her heart so full it ached. This was her family. This impossible, wonderful, chaotic family. And she would fight for them until her last breath. The test came in August. A letter arrived from back east, Philadelphia, from a name Clara hadn't thought about in years. Her father. "Who's it from?" Jackson asked, seeing her face go pale. "The man who sold me to Henry Sullivan when I was 16. Clara's voice was flat. "My father." Jackson's expression darkened. "What does he want?" Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. The handwriting was uneven, clearly written by someone whose hands weren't steady. "He's dying. Says he wants to make peace before he goes." She laughed bitterly. "Peace? As if a letter can erase what he did. Do you want to see him?" "No." The word was immediate, absolute. "I never want to see him again." "Then don't." Jackson took the letter from her hands. "You don't owe him anything, Clara. Not forgiveness, not closure, not even acknowledgement. But he's dying. So are we all eventually. That doesn't earn him your time or your tears." Clara looked at her husband, this man who understood her in ways no one else ever had. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to be alone," she said quietly. "To face things without someone standing beside me. You never have to remember." Jackson pulled her close. "I'm not going anywhere." She burned the letter that night, watched the paper curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash. It felt like freedom. Years passed as years do, each one bringing changes, both expected and surprising. Thomas grew into a young man who combined his father's stubbornness with his mother's courage. At 14, he could ride better than most of the ranch hands. At 16, he was helping Jackson manage the cattle operations. At 18, he announced his intention to study law. "Law?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "I thought you wanted to ranch." "I want to fight the men like Mercer, the ones who use the law as a weapon against people who can't fight back." Thomas's jaw set. "I want to be the one standing between them and their victims." Clara cried when she heard, cried harder when Thomas left for school in Denver. But she knew he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. Ruth became the ranch's unofficial bookkeeper, her talent for numbers growing into genuine expertise. Abigail opened a veterinary practice of sorts, treating every sick animal in the territory. Samuel developed a passion for horses that rivaled Jackson's own. And William the baby, who'd survived fire and freezing, grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who saw everything and said little. Hope became the family's joy. She had Jackson's stubbornness and Clara's fire, a combination that made her terrifying at 2 and magnificent at 10. She followed Thomas everywhere until he left for school, then transferred her devotion to Jackson, becoming his constant shadow on the ranch. "She's going to run this place someday," Jackson observed one evening, watching Hope argue with a ranch hand twice her age about the proper way to break a horse. "She's 12. She's unstoppable," Jackson grinned. "Wonder where she gets that from." Clara smiled. Complete mystery. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jackson took Clara to the place where he'd found her. The spot was unremarkable now, just a stretch of open ground, with new grass growing where fire had burned so long ago. But Clara remembered. She would never forget. "This is where I heard you singing," Jackson said quietly. That lullaby. You were singing to your children while you waited to die. I thought it was over. I thought we were all going to burn. I heard that song, and something in me knew. Knew that I had to reach you. Knew that if I let you die, I'd be dying too. Clara took his hand. You saved us. You saved me right back. He turned to face her. 10 years ago, I was a dead man walking. I had money and land and power, and none of it meant anything because I had no one to share it with. You changed that. You and your beautiful, stubborn, impossible children. Our children, Clara corrected. Our children. Jackson smiled. All 6 of them. Even Thomas, who still threatens to hurt me if I hurt you. He's protective. He's terrifying. He got that from you. Clara laughed. Guilty. They stood in silence for a moment, remembering the fire that had brought them together, the flames that had destroyed one life and built another. No regrets? Jackson asked. Not one. Even when I'm difficult. Especially when you're difficult. Clara touched his face. That's when I know you're being yourself. Jackson kissed her, then slow and sweet, with all the passion of a man who still couldn't believe his luck. I love you, Clara Hawthorne. I love you too, Jackson Hawthorne, today and every day. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Thomas had come home from law school for the occasion. Ruth and her new husband sat beside Ida, who at 70 still ruled the household with an iron will. Abigail argued with Samuel about something to do with horses. William listened quietly to Hope's dramatic retelling of her latest adventure. And at the head of the table, Jackson Hawthorne watched his family with eyes that held no shadows. Clara touched his hand under the table. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about fire. That's morbid for an anniversary dinner. Not the fire that burned your cabin. Jackson squeezed her hand. The fire that saved us. The fire that brought you to me. Clara understood. Some fires destroy. Some fires illuminate. And some fires, Jackson said, looking at his wife, his children, his life. Some fires create something so beautiful from the ashes that you forget there was ever anything before them. Clara leaned against his shoulder, surrounded by the family they'd built, the love they'd chosen, the future they'd created from nothing but hope and stubbornness. No more fire talk, she said. Eat your dinner. Bossy. Always. Jackson laughed, a full, free sound that still surprised Clara, sometimes even after 10 years. Around them, their children laughed too. The sound filled the house, spilled out into the Wyoming evening, rose toward the stars. And somewhere in some version of heaven, Clara didn't quite believe in, but hoped for. Anyway, she imagined that Henry Sullivan and Margaret Hawthorne were watching, seeing the happiness that had grown from their endings, understanding that death wasn't always the end. Sometimes it was just the beginning of a different story. Mama. Hope tugged her sleeve. Tell us the story. How Papa found you in the fire. You've heard it 100 times. Tell it again. Clara looked at Jackson. He smiled. Fire doesn't ask permission, Clara began, and her children leaned in, eager to hear the tale they all knew by heart. It doesn't care if you're ready. She told the story as the stars emerged and the lanterns flickered, and her family listened with the particular attention of people hearing their own mythology. The story of a widow with 5 children and nowhere to go. The story of a man who'd lost everything and found it again. The story of fire and survival and love that rose from ashes. Their story. And it was perfect. Because some fires destroy. Some fires illuminate. But the rarest fires of all create something new from the ruins of what was something stronger, something better, something that could never have existed without the burning. Clara Sullivan had walked into fire and found Jackson Hawthorne. Jackson Hawthorne had ridden through flames and found his reason to live, and together they had built something that would outlast them both. A family, a legacy, A love story written in the harsh, beautiful language of the American West. That was the truth of it. That was all that mattered. Fire had taken everything from them, and in return, it had given them each other.